We're joined by Alison Rose, NatWest Group Chief Executive, also the first woman to lead a major UK bank. Thank you so much for joining us, Alison. There's a lot to talk about because we're trying to discuss in 20 minutes, striving for equality in business, finance, and society. I feel like we need 4 hours, but unfortunately, we just don't have the time for that. Are you disappointed that in 2020, we still have to talk about diversity and equality? Or actually, have we really made progress over the last 5 years?
Yeah, I'm always going to be disappointed that we have to talk about it, because I think although we have made incredible progress, if I think in my career from when I started to now where I am, there's been amazing progress, but it's just not fast enough. And I think we'll need to continue to talk about it from a gender perspective and just more explicitly from an inclusion perspective until we don't have to talk about it again. So I'm always going to be impatient that the progress isn't fast enough.
I mean, what does COVID actually mean for equality and diversity and fairness in society? Is it almost a great equalizer, or does it just accentuate the differences?
Well, I think in some ways it is a great equalizer. It's forced us to really look at what's going on. And there are a number of things happening, both in terms of demographic split, in terms of diversity and inclusion. And you have other issues happening, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, around Black Lives Matter as well. So COVID has really forced, I think, a rethink and a restart and an opportunity for us to address some of these issues.
Do you think that the pandemic is also almost like a way of making sure that businesses feel like they have a purpose? Do you think that's reinvigorated that at NatWest?
I think it absolutely has. But I mean, I announced a new strategy in February, which seems a lifetime ago now, pre-COVID. And we launched a new strategy about being a purpose-led bank. And I think it's really critical for businesses to have a purpose. We talked about creating a purpose that would create long-term sustainable value for shareholders. Absolutely, we've got to be a business that contributes, but also that thinks more broadly than just single shareholders, about all of its stakeholders. And we've focused on wanting to unlock the potential that exists in families and businesses right the way up and down the country of our customers that we support. And for me, I think every business has to think about its impact and the difference it can make. We actually focused 3 focus areas. I launched in February around focusing on enterprise, helping entrepreneurs and businesses and removing the barriers that affect them, financial education and inclusion, and climate. And so I think that becomes even more accentuated in a COVID environment. And for me, it's really helped determining our response to COVID as well. It's been a real North Star for people.
Is that because you just want to do a bit of good in the world, because you want the next generation to be on a better footing, or does it just make business sense?
It makes business sense. I think it's a fundamental imperative for having sustainable businesses. I think you have to think as a business leader more broadly around your customers and the communities that you support, as well as the environment you're creating for your colleagues. And I think that creates value more broadly than just short-term value. You want to create long-term value. So it's absolutely good business sense. But obviously, big businesses have a responsibility to recognize their impact in the communities that they live and work. That's how all of my bankers think. And I've seen when you don't think like that, you can do harm, and you've got to be multidimensional and think about all your stakeholders. So at the core, it's good business sense, and it's about creating long-term value, and it has repercussions for how the value that you create more broadly than shareholder value in your business.
Given, COVID is going to be pretty tough. I don't know what will happen in like a couple of months or the next couple of years, but it looks like we could have a massive recession at the end of the pandemic. Given some of the things that you've outlined and that other business leaders have outlined, do you think we'll have a fairer and greener society?
I think we have to. There is a real opportunity here and it's a phrase that we've used around building back better. I think as we come out of this pandemic, what you've seen is actually an acceleration of some underlying trends that were already happening. So we know that climate is a massive challenge for our generation, for businesses and globally. And actually, this is the opportunity to see how we can support that. But I think what you're seeing is an acceleration of trends and an opportunity to build back better. And I think balancing, for me, being a purpose-led organization means balancing those needs across all your stakeholders. And we should all be embracing that so that we can make a difference and create more sustainable and equal value.
So concretely, what does that mean, Alison? How are you going to hire differently? How are you going to treat your talent within the organization?
Yeah, well, I think for me, talent is really important. And any business, any organization should be thinking about how do I get the most diverse talent within my organization? Because if you're bringing in that diversity of thought, that creativity, that constant learning, you're going to get better results. And I think, one of the things that we're seeing from the recession that's coming, from some of the early signs, it is the younger generation who are going to struggle more coming out of COVID. And so making sure we're hiring good, diverse talent, young people from diverse backgrounds to grow the next generation of talent and contribute to the organization is critical. I mean, we've really focused on making sure we're continuing to recruit our graduates. We're welcoming 260 graduates who are joining us next week. We kept our internship program going, albeit we did it remotely during the summer. And we focused on hiring apprentices from different economic backgrounds that would not normally be attracted to banking or captured in the normal way. So I think you've got to think really differently about your talent and recognize the demographic and this younger generation who are going to be affected by COVID more, and making sure we reach out and do more to help them. And that's on recruitment. And then I think more broadly, one of the things we're doing is how can we help people start businesses? I've got a real focus on female entrepreneurs, but all entrepreneurs. And also, how can you help people manage their finances and have confidence around their financial capability? Because that's a core requirement. So we can do more to educate around that as well.
I know, Alison, you've done a lot of work, to try and understand some of this underrepresentation. Why do a lot of businesses don't have a more diverse workforce? Is it at entry level? Do people drop off after a certain while? Like, what's the secret sauce to retaining good people from different backgrounds?
Yeah, look, for me, it's all about the culture of the organization you create. You've absolutely got to have the policies in place to hire and recruit in a very diverse way. So, my graduate intake this year, we've got 57% female, but we've also got 40% BAME coming in. So you've got to attract diverse talent, but then you've also got to nurture them through the organization, address unconscious bias, remove the barriers that will be there in an unconscious way, and create an environment and a culture that talent can thrive regardless of their background. So, that's one of the challenges. There's no one silver bullet that will fix anything. So you've got to put interventions in place. But fundamentally, you've got to have a culture of an organization that is really going to embrace inclusivity and talent and have the pull and push factor to allow people to thrive.
I know you also set out a goal, I think, to help create some 50,000 new businesses that are led by either females or BAME, chief executives, also outside London. I mean, why are more organizations not doing that?
Yeah, well, I'm encouraging as many organizations as I can. When I launched the Rose Review, which was looking at female entrepreneurship, and we took a broader view, I think it's incumbent on everyone who can help should help, and it's good business sense. So more support that we can put in to encourage entrepreneurs and help entrepreneurs survive through that difficult period when they're starting up businesses, then you're creating new jobs, you're contributing to the economy. I'm really pleased, actually, the result from the Rose Review is we now have 67 organizations signed up to the banking code to help entrepreneurs, and our council that was set up to really encourage more VC investment has set an ambitious target to get 30% of investment to female founders or co-founders by 2030. So I think that's a real sign that people are willing to help and to do more, and laying out what you can do to really make a difference, I think, should encourage people to get involved and help remove barriers that will encourage enterprise. And enterprise doesn't just exist in the big cities, it exists everywhere. And what we've seen from previous economic recessions is as unemployment goes up, that may be the trigger to encourage people to start their own businesses. So there's a real opportunity to try and address not just the barriers to enterprise, but also helping people back into employment as well, if they want to start a business.
And Alison, what will you do to increase gender diversity at NatWest Group?
So we're very clear that we've set targets. I'm a great believer in, if you don't measure it, it doesn't get done. So we have a very broad program around helping encourage women coming into banking, encouraging girls to think about banking. I have a program called Dream Brigger, which goes into schools and encourages girls to think about finance as a career, to think about entrepreneurship as a career, to work on resilience and really encourage more people into the pipeline. But we set targets at our top 4 levels. We have a fully diverse represented board. My executive team now is over 30% female, and we have targets at our CEO -4 level right the way through the organisation to encourage all elements of diversity and inclusivity. And all of my team are encouraged to embrace it, as well as broader elements of inclusivity. But I think you set targets, you put interventions in place, and you create a culture that hopefully will encourage people and allow that talent to thrive.
Why do you think not enough females actually join banking in the first place? Is it a cultural thing? Is it a perception? Is it seen as too aggressive?
I think historically, the financial sector has been very male dominated. When I started my career, I joined areas where I was the only woman in the room, and that was, for a long time part of the environment I operated in. So I think it sort of starts from having a perception of being like that. But the culture of banking has changed enormously. We need to do a better job of explaining the fact you can have 1,000 different careers in one organization, and what an exciting environment it is, and then create the culture that people can really be their whole selves when they come here. And increasingly seeing more women come into banking. What we need to do is now get more women through into executive positions so that they really can make a difference, so that you've got a really diverse workforce. I know certainly being part of diverse teams is fantastic, because you get different perspectives, different challenge, different creativity, which makes you more competitive. So making sure we can really articulate the attraction of this industry, I think will encourage more women to join.
Do you ever get pushback with some of these initiatives or some of the things you're trying to do and change?
No, I mean, a lot of what I get when I've driven diverse debates and the cultural change, it is a ask for help from people. Why am I not attracting more women? Why do I have an inclusivity problem? How do we address this? And a lot of it is unconscious bias. You have to look at talent in a very different way, rather than through the lens with which you would typically look at it. So generally, I don't get pushback. I get an ask for, how can I get the best talent? How can I get help? And I think explaining the business case, explaining the imperative, this isn't a nice to do. This is an absolute business imperative. And so it's asking for help, asking for interventions. So no, I'm very lucky. My team are fully on board about creating an inclusive culture. We've got very high representation in our top 4 layers, so that's good. Lots more to do. I'll continue to be impatient. I'll continue to drive the targets, but I think nobody's got one silver bullet to fix this. So everybody's looking for help and sharing best practice. It's one of those areas where it's a non-competitive environment, so we're all looking to learn from each other.
How has the Black Lives Matter movement actually changed the way you look at diversity and inclusion at NatWest?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Black Lives Matter issue has really been, a tough environment and a tough conversation for lots of people to have. But what it's done is it's brought the conversation to the fore. And it's been a pretty emotional experience for a lot of my colleagues from the BAME background, and particularly my Black colleagues, and understanding the experience they're going through, the experience in their own personal lives, and what's happened to them and what this means to them has really brought it to the forefront. We have, I've asked my employee-led network to run a task force within the organisation, and we're having some pretty uncomfortable conversations to understand, the challenges that our Black colleagues have gone through in their lives and in their careers, and really what it means to be an inclusive environment. So it's really stimulated the debate. It's challenging us to think differently. It's making us think about how we should be supporting, not just our colleagues, but our customers, the broader communities who we support every day, but to understand what's happening from their perspective, and really taking a look at whether we truly have a progressive and inclusive culture and that everyone feels that way. And until everybody does, we know our job's not done.
So have you taken extra action to support, specific causes on Black Lives Matter?
Yeah, well, we've had a BAME target in our organisation for a while, but the specific action that we've taken is we launched a task force led by our employees and ran a cultural survey to ask what should we do to really make a difference. And actually, that team are coming back to the executive team this week to talk about the recommendations and measures. We have 10 different recommendations and actions we're specifically going to take to improve the culture, inclusivity, very specifically through a BAME lens.
Alison, do you believe that big business needs to have a point of view on all of these issues?
I do think we need to have a point of view because we are dealing every day with thousands of our colleagues and our customers and communities where this is impacting their lives. And so, when you're dealing with that and have such a broad representation, I think it's important that your organisation is seen, your colleagues see you and understand what you represent. So I think it is important that we have a view because we can have an impact.
Is that for your customers or is it for, the people that work for NatWest, or both?
For both. I think it's for both. My organisation is dealing with customers, and if we are not reflective of the customer base that we serve, then we're going to be out of touch. For our colleagues, they've got to feel that they have an environment where they are recognised and can thrive, and their home life is as important as their work life. So I think it's really important across our customer base and our colleagues.
When you look at some of the government schemes put in place, furloughs, but I'm also thinking of apprenticeships. Do you feel like they understand what needs to happen in the next 12 to 18 months to really make sure that something changes after this pretty harsh 2020?
Yeah, I think there is a real understanding of the challenging times ahead, and undoubtedly, everyone's wrestling with what has been a health crisis that's triggered an economic crisis, and there are consequences that we still don't know yet. The real long-term damage to the economy and the underlying damage isn't yet known. But I think some of these issues that we're now talking about, which I think it's really important that we do talk about, around inclusivity, around the challenges in terms of social inequality, around the impact that business can have more broadly, are important issues that we should be talking about. And so in the discussions that we're having with government, when we're talking with our colleagues about planning for the future, we're thinking about how those issues should affect our recruitment, how we treat our customers, what sort of products we need. So I think it's very important. It's on the agenda as we're thinking about the recovery of the economy and the support we need to put in place.
What's the best piece of advice you would give to someone who says, sometimes when I see inequality or injustice, someone being treated unfairly or not right in the workplace or elsewhere, I want to speak up, but I don't really know how to find the right tone. I mean, I'm sure you've had to, deal with that. All of us really have. But what kind of advice would you give?
I think I would always encourage everyone to have a voice. One of the things I say within our organisation is that everybody has a voice. So even if you are not the victim of that inequality, walking past it means that you are silently endorsing it. And a lot of the time we talk about the destructive nature of microaggressions, the everyday that can wear people down. So I think it's really important that we are all allies to each other, and therefore we should speak up on behalf of the culture we represent and the inequality that we see. And I think it's really important to create a culture where people can have those uncomfortable conversations. We've been talking, with my colleagues, I've been participating in some of them, talking about white fragility and white supremacy. Those are uncomfortable topics for people to talk about. But I think building understanding the language allows you to have those uncomfortable conversations. And I think it's really critical. This isn't particularly on Black Lives Matters. This isn't up to our Black colleagues to talk about it. It's up to all of us to talk about it so we can build understanding and solutions.